The list that we just sat down as groups and individuals and businesses that might be affected by what's going on in the county. So if you have a friend that says, well, why didn't I get invited to the meeting? It was just merely an oversight on our part. We tried to look at the 32 corridor and identify businesses and groups and organizations that might be affected by this project. So we did not advertise it to the general public. We tried to keep it more at a business, governmental, organizational level. So again, if anybody says to you, why didn't I get invited? This is our first meeting. We hope there's more. Okay. Secondly, on behalf of Senator Engler, he was unable to attend today because of a previous engagement. And also Mayor Grimminger expresses his regrets that he couldn't make it today because of a previous commitment. With that, just a few opening remarks before we start the program. Obviously, transportation and moving materials is a major issue for growth and development of any county, city, or governmental organization. And there are probably 4 major ways you can do that. Obviously, air is one, and we don't have an airport, so we don't have to worry about that. River, we're blessed to have the Mississippi River here. Blessed and cursed, depending upon what's going on. And obviously, the Mississippi River has provided enormous opportunities for our community and our mineral resources to be developed here. Third way, rail. We have good north-south rail. Our east-west rail facility is something else that we need to keep alive, and hopefully can develop that in the future more. And then finally, our highways and roads. And it's very obvious to all of us, we have a great northwest corridor with I-55. Our east-west corridor, Highway 32, probably leaves a bit to be, could use some improvement because of things that have happened and are going to happen. We started to look at the Highway 32 project from here to Farmington and break it down into 3 areas, from 55 into St. Genevieve, from 55 to Highway C, and then from Highway C to Farmington. Now, we did not invite over a lot of people from Farmington. We're kind of starting the project on this side, get our core group together, and if this thing expands, then obviously we would look to St. Francis County for assistance and support. Particularly, I think the area that we are focusing on right now is the area from Interstate 55 to Highway C. That's the area that has probably the worst curves, roads, and access onto the highway. And over a period of time here, that particular area has seen a lot of growth and development. We always say nothing ever happens in St. Genevieve, but if you look back at the growth of Billman Trucking Company out there, High Log Companies just moved out there, Mr. Grieshopper's investment at Southbound Fuel. Farther out, we've had Mr. Beezer with the Midway Convenience Store and Bar and Grill. And there have been many other smaller businesses develop along there, as well as obviously the housing development around the golf course. And of course, the future major, I guess, investment out there that's going underway now, will be open here in a few weeks, is Weingarten Winery. Obviously, along with that, one of our biggest resources of our communities are our students that travel over that corridor. St. Genevieve, Perry County is going to many activities over in the Mineral Area Conference. So Highway 32 is obviously a major issue for us and something that needs to be looked at. And if this, not a matter of if, I got that wrong, when the port develops, the impact of the port and what goes on there and the types of companies that come in could provide a lot more traffic onto that highway. And I've heard some numbers of users, maybe 300,000 tons a year or 500,000 tons a year. And when you transfer that number into 30 tons a truck, 300,000 tons a year would be 50 trucks a day, 50 weeks out of the year, 5 days a week. So those are some huge numbers, and if those numbers were to get a lot higher and you had a 1 million ton user, then obviously you just multiply that number of trucks out there. So we think it's important to be looking at that area. We know already we have several hot spots. I refer to it as hot spots. Obviously around 32 and 55, there's major issues there with all the traffic things going on there with B Road coming in. You move out farther with Highway O, people coming over from Lake Forest and Rocky Ridge going to the Weingarten area there. And then the developments there in Wine Garden, and of course Sea Road has been and will continue to be more of a problem, particularly with the development of the winery out there. So what we wanted to try to do today was cover a few bases here, at least start to introduce a little bit about what we're working on here. And at this time, I'll turn the microphone over to our president, Tom Grimminger, who will oversee the program today. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Ron. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on introductions. Got a lot of important people. I know your time's valuable. As some of the Congress people and the local government officials are come up on the program, we'll just introduce them as they come up. So without going into a whole bunch of introductions here of who's here and who's not, we're going to get right into the program. Ron gave a pretty good explanation of why we're doing this. Bill Robertson from the state, I don't think he's coming today to tell us that he's got millions of dollars to stick into this right off the bat, and I don't think there's any other government official here that's bringing too many millions along to do this today. Joe or Catherine, you're not bringing any real good news or anything?
I left it out in the car.
You left it in the car. Okay. All right. We're going to get right into it then, and the first program that we're going to have is a presentation from the Port Authority, since this is pretty immediate from what Ron and the Port Authority people tell us. This is going to come online here pretty quick. Could be as early as next fall, depending on what the river does to us this spring. They have both Ron and Chauncey Buckeye will give a presentation on kind of an update on the Bourbon Port Authority. So at this point, I don't know if you want to use the microphone or...
Can y'all hear me? Is that okay? Reach. I want to talk a little bit about, I don't know, does everybody know what the Port Authority is all about? And how do we need to go into background on that? The thing was formed back in the early 80s, 1982, governed by a 7-person board. Had 3 members from St. John County, 3 members from Perry County, and then the board elects a 7th. Right now, our board members, Ronnie Inman's president, Kathy Waltz is vice president or vice chairman and chairman. I guess that's the way it goes. I always get those mixed up. Brad Mulls, our secretary treasurer, Dave Fleeg, Sonny Roman, Don Polish, and Rodney Rischerity are the 7 board members. Port authorities, they function under Chapter 68 state statutes of Missouri. Again, it was formed by Perry and St. John County back in 1982, so it's been around a long time. Haven't had a whole lot of stuff happen other than the fact that the Port Authority owns the ferry that runs back and forth up here in St. Genevieve, and that operator is here today. So we're very fortunate to be able to get some money from the state. And Sherry Turley with the MoDOT is here also, and Sherry does a very good job on helping to keep that ferry running, as well as providing some funding for the Port Authority through the state of Missouri. Have a little bit of a presentation showing what the Port Authority will amount to once it gets going. And there's going to be right now, originally, I guess, the Port Authority owned about 72 acres of property down in the big field off of Cottonwood Road. Recently, they purchased another 52 acres of land. We're going to be able to, and I've got a slide here showing how big the harbor will be and how many barges will be able to load out of that thing. Just trying to give you an overview about where it's located. I guess that was originally a blowout when we had one of the many floods in St. Genevieve. In 82. Yeah. Just a little overview about where exactly it is, and we've got some other maps hanging up around the wall showing a little bit more detail about where the port's at. Again, this is, my pointer works very well. Cottonwood Road coming in. is showing the main line of the Burlington Northern Railroad. Right now, we don't have the funding to build the rail, but there is funding in place to complete the harbor and the loadout facility. And this gives you a little bit more of an overview of what's going on. There'll be loading capacity for up to 4 to 8 barges simultaneously, depending upon how the loadout happens. There'll be direct river loading locations. There'll be an internal fleeting for 4 additional barges. The harbor area will be at elevation 380 feet, and that is what, Ron? That's about 100-year flood area. 19.2 acres of harbor when the river's high, 15 acres when it's at minimal operation. There'll be some 20 acres of tenant space at least initially available, and that space will be elevated so that they won't be getting wet when the river's up. 2,100 lineal feet of tenant frontage. That's really about it from the perspective of the port, what it's going to do. It's going to be designed so that it could handle up to about 1 million ton a year. Is that right? And so that could be, a sizable amount of tonnage coming through. It's going to be a generator of jobs as well as a generator of traffic. And they kind of go hand in hand. So we're pretty excited about the possibility of seeing some things actually develop and bringing some economic development to this area. Ronnie, do you have some?
Just getting back to the reason we're here with this truck traffic thing, a rake hopper will hold 1,500 ton when they're loaded to 9 foot, and a box hopper 1,700 ton. So if you take a 25-ton average truckload on a tractor trailer, which is 4 trucks per 100, and you've got 1,500 and 1,700, and they want to do that in a day's time, you can imagine the 50 trucks that Ron mentioned might be multiplied 4 or 5 times that day if they haul from, say, over in the Lead Belt area or somewhere if there's material coming from that direction. And there's other possibilities coming in. I can see a real traffic problem at 61 and 32 here in town with the stoplight that the locals, once this thing gets going, is probably not going to be very happy, which may bring other things along for some kind of another access road down the line if hopefully the port grows like it is. For some of you all later, and I won't take that much time, there are 2 pictures on the bottom when we get down if you want to look around. Shows the harbor, but these pictures were taken by the Corps of Engineers, and they was gracious enough to let us use those photos, and those were taken in mid-October, about halfway through. So I'll stand around up here when we're done. Anybody wants to ask any questions, feel free to. So we think we've got possibilities of grain, possibilities of backhauls of fertilizer, salt. There's all kinds of people that's been inquiring with the port when we're going to be ready. And we was in hopes this fall, but it depends on what God and the river does to us, because we just had to do 6,000 ton of emergency work, which was work that was going to be done to protect the fresh dirt that we had out there, or we would have lost thousands of yards. We were already losing some by the time we got there Monday morning. So anyway, any questions later on, and Tom will get off here, and I'll be free to stick around while anybody wants to ask anything. Same way with Chauncey. We won't talk about money, but anybody wants to ask how many dollars, Chauncey can give you those figures.
Okay, and while you're listening to the presenters here this morning, one of the things that we'd like to do as we come out of this meeting today would be, this is an organizational, informational meeting that we're having today. We don't have any answers. We're hoping that we get a bunch of questions before this meeting's out. But what we'd like to do is form a base committee. And I have a list that I'll go over here at the end of what we think of about 12 people from different governmental and business organizations, both in St. Francis, St. John County, that we would like, somebody that's really interested and is willing to spend some time that would be willing to serve on that committee of about 10, 12 people. And this would include, as I said, county government officials and IDCs and IDAs, regional planning and port authority and so forth. So think about this, and we also have a couple members that would be from businesses that would be located on 32. It's a huge project. Probably the thing we should think about is approaching this in phases. And of course, the first phase, I would think that we would be concerned with would be the safety aspect of what we can do to Highway 32 to make it safer for our residents and the people that's going to be using it, especially with this onslaught of additional traffic that's going to be on 32. So, we might think about a phase one, just to throw it out, phase one being Highway 32 from a mile west of C to 55, or even to shorten it more, a mile west of C to a mile east of Highway O. And if you think about those, I know all of you are familiar with 32, if you think about what's in between there, as far as some of the dangerous spots and so forth, what was it, 3 years ago that the Highway 32 was widened, or they did a lot of shoulder work and so forth on it? Was it longer than that?
Yeah, 10 years exactly.
Was it 10 years? No, it wasn't 10 years. And I'm sure all of you have been out that way lately. I've noticed, I've got sons, and granddaughters, and grandkids that live out on sea, and I've noticed here just recently, that the actual paving itself, Bill, is cupping out and breaking up, and so I don't know. We'll find out from you here in a minute if there's any plans as far as working on what's there already. But, all right, we'll continue going on, and the next presenter that's on the program for today is Al Sullivan, who is the St. Francis County IDA president, and he's going to talk about a regional industrial site study that I take it that St. Francis County, or
All four counties.
all four counties have done, so I'll turn it over to Bill.
Thank you very much. I apologize for my laryngitis this morning. About 3 years ago, when it became apparent that the completion of US 67 through southern Missouri was going to take place in the near future, the four counties of Madison, St. Genevieve, Iron, and St. Francis presiding commissioners came together and entered into an informal agreement to promote the four counties for economic development. We assessed the resources that were available to us at the time and what would be the most effective plan to set forth. In consultation with a large corporation in the state of Missouri, the recommendation was made to secure the services of a nationally known consulting firm to conduct a site search for what they call a mega industrial site, which is 750 to 1,000 acres. There only being one and four counties involved, there had to be other avenues pursued to keep the interests of the counties. And the secondary recommendation that will come out of this study that's soon to be completed is the location of smaller sites within the four counties for industrial parks or purposes. I know in St. Francis County there's very little space left in any of the organized industrial parks that exist over there, and so the need for development of certain areas. This would be a firm nationally known who, when they put their stamp of approval on it, it means much more than if you had a local firm or even a state firm do this. And so the services of McCullum and Sweeney were secured, and they have been at this for about 12 months. They were back here Wednesday, again toured all four counties to shore up data that they were looking for, and they're going back to present, to finalize their report that will be presented. They said this week that the major industrial site would be two-tiered. One would be for very heavy manufacturing, the other, another possibility, depending on what the area wants to try to develop, would be for smaller, lighter manufacturing. And then we reaffirmed with them again that all 4 counties would have plans of where in their county would be places to develop. We've been at this for quite a while, and we're about to have a plan of action which will be put into operation. The transportation is essential to this. We were looking at it from the standpoint of what economic development will take place as a result of 67 becoming a major transportation link, and certainly the concept that you would be able to tie those 2 major arteries of transportation together to link up with the Port Authority is just another feather in the cap, or another must that we must have in this area. And so this project will be going forward, will be announced, will be worked on. It's been reaffirmed by the presiding commissioners again to work in tandem to bring this into a long-term reality. Another thing that is on the drawing board for the 4 counties is an idea of co-partnering with Mineral Area College. Mineral Area College, Three Rivers Community College, and Southeast Missouri State University have all created associate and baccalaureate degrees in green technologies. The state of Missouri has on MERIC, and you can download it, Missouri's Green Industry Competency Model. There is a project over at Mineral Area College, and I'll leave some flyers on it now. As you go by on the highway now, you'll see a windmill, you'll see a large, you don't see it from the highway, but on the campus is a huge solar panel, and they're actually generating power and using it and measuring those results on campus. Mineral Area College is involved with the Danforth Plant Center at Washington University, and I'll leave the things that have been developed there. The Danforth Foundation is also working in the area of biodiesel fuels and the use of algae, and there is a company being developed in the state of Hawaii to capture this algae, squeeze it down, and to use the byproduct of that for fuel. So there are a lot of things on the drawing board. I'll be glad to answer any questions of information I have about the 4-county project, but we see that the spill out from wherever the location, and certainly with your Port Authority in addition to your rail and your highway, places St. Genevieve very high on the priority list for major development and manufacturing. These people that we've employed have done work for TVA and the locations of large facilities within the geographic area of the Tennessee Valley Authority, and they've also done a lot of work in Mississippi with regard to the development of the car plants down there. So I won't take more time, but there's nothing could be more urgent than for all of us to work to get the development of Highway 32 so we have another major transportation link. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Al. And we'll have, I think we'll have time here at the end to where we'll have a question and answer session for any of these presenters. So we'll just hold all the questions until everybody gives their presentation. Next on the agenda, we'll hear from Representative Joe Fowler.
Morning. First, I'd like to thank the Port Authority for their long-term waiting for money as it took us. We just broke the ground after 30 years or close to it. And also for all the members that come visit me every year up there. But I'd also like to thank MoDOT. We were fortunate before some of our funding dried up. We did get some improvements in the last couple of years with Highway B, new bridge at Bloomsdale, new bridge at Stocktown, and some other improvements and some of the money for the port. And we got some pretty good funding the last couple of years that's making this happen. So for everybody that helped do that, I want to thank them for sticking with it, which kind of brings us back to everybody's doing a great job individually, planning, regional planning, and but having a long-range plan and a group of people that work together, not from all the different entities. Having represented southern Jefferson County, I've been working for the last 4 years with the Highway 21 Task Force up there, which has been another one of them 20 or 30-year projects to get Highway 21 extended down. And as of now, the goal was to take it all the way to the Jefferson County line. We're 4 miles short of DeSoto, and we don't have any more money. We don't even have the property bought up yet, and there's a real concern over that. So I know that to get it to where it is was a project that took the entire community, and the task force, they meet regularly, twice every other month, I believe, and have an annual banquet every year for everybody to come. All the MoDOT folks come down, and they work with the East-West Gateway, though, so that's another challenge for them. That they don't think that part of the country is part of the metropolitan area anymore. But we have worked, and I have been working with MoDOT, and a lot of the areas that were mentioned earlier, on that corridor 32, at the intersections of B and A and High all moving. I've had several times we've had them go out and look at whether we need stoplights and stuff because of the extra traffic with Beelman. And it's my understanding TT may be moving back into that area. Truck Transport has bought some property, and so that needs to be looked at. And also I've been, over the years, had several times Highway 32 and O. I've had complaints, about lighting there, especially at night with all the development with Lake Forest and Greyhawk out there. So there's a lot of, they're actually 2 of our larger communities, if you tie them together, that are stuck on a road that could use some improvement, and I think it's probably on Chauncey's list. I know some of the residents have contacted him about that. And also I've had a couple studies done on the speeds through the Midway area out there because of the residents complaining with all the on-off traffic. They'd like to see the speeds lowered. So all of this ties together with the issues out at C Road, and by having a group that can work together and work with MoDOT, I think we'll do a lot of good things. But having this plan together and having the long-range study, or a group, and having shovel-ready projects when money comes available, that was something that maybe we started a couple years ago when the recovery money was out there. There was a lot of money came to Missouri for shovel-ready projects, but when those kind of funds come available, you have to be ready to go, or you're just going to be on the short end of the list. So I'll let maybe, I don't know if Kathy's going to say anything for Russ, but if she can get him to reauthorize some of the federal funding, maybe we could do something there. But I look forward to working with the group and hope to be participating in the project over the next few years. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. The next one is Kathy Welts, who is representing Congressman Russ Carnahan.
Thank you. Thank you to Ron for organizing this meeting, and Tom, and especially to everybody who got an invite and showed up and is spending your time here to investigate and work on this project. A couple of years ago, when I came into a meeting like this, somebody would have picked me up and carried me around on his shoulders and fed me grapes because I did have money in the car, so to speak. Well, unfortunately, the answer is it's gone. Maybe, if you want to look at the downside, maybe this meeting is 2 or 3 years too late, but it's never too late to get started again. And so rather than saying, there is no ERA money, Bill can't have any more money, I'm not going to have the congressman write any more letters of support, let's look at it the other way. Let's look at it as we now have a gift from God of a couple more years that we can solidify this committee, get the plans together. Mr. Sullivan said that consultant's been working for a year on the mega site. Okay, so we know we're a year too late. But this has to be the beginning of this committee, of everybody working together, working with Bill and Sherry and Chauncey to be ready for when the door will open and when there will be federal funds available again. this could have been a no-brainer if we had something on paper last year. Bill and I would have been working together. Chauncey would have filled in the forms, and it just would have been a no-brainer appropriation, and the money would probably be here already, and work would be started. So let's say, oh, well, nuts, we missed that one. But by looking at who's here today, I see that this group, these organizations, can really get ready and be ready when there is going to be additional funding. Everybody knows the no earmark thing, okay? We can't do anything. There's probably, for 2 more years, not going to be a transportation bill. Everybody would like it. There was one in the hopper going down the road last year, but that transportation bill mysteriously fell off the desk of the new chairman. So there's an old saying, when you ain't got nothing, you ain't got nothing to lose. So let's continue to work. This is just the first step. And look at what we can get and what we can do, because these dire circumstances will change. And the congressman will stand ready to support this project. We'll be working with MoDOT for supporting the wickets they have to go through with Chauncey. I've been a member of the Port Authority for like 8 years, I think. So I know how hard it is to struggle through when you just have paper and no cash. But again, this is the best bright spot I've seen on the St. Genevieve County horizon in a really long time in terms of growth and industrial development. And I hope that we will, before we leave here today, Ron Armbruster, let's pick, or Tom, how frequently this group is going to meet, when we're going to come back again. Don't let the enthusiasm die for lack of not having a sack of money in the back of my car. Let's keep going with it, because we can do this, and it desperately needs to be done. I lived on Sea Road before they took out part of that bluff. People would call me and say, was that you? Oh, you answered, no, it wasn't you killed in that accident, pulling out off a C to go on to 32. I mean, the body count was rising all the time. Most of that stretch of road from here to C, or that mile west, you know, a raccoon can't cross on a little ridge because they get nailed. You can't, it's just treacherous, and it's going to get more treacherous the more traffic that there is. But the more traffic that there is means economic growth and development for our county and neighboring counties. And so we're going to have to do what we can with the road. Everybody pitch together, support what MoDOT's going to have to do to get us these road improvements. They just don't write it up and turn it in and they get it. It's a lot of work for them to justify and make their organization understand how important a project like this will be in terms of not just safety, but in terms of economic development. So I'll be glad to help in the future. I thank you again for letting me be here today, and I'll be around at the end too if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And I guess the next presenter, the guy with all the funds, no? Bill Robertson with the Missouri Highway Department.
Chauncey, I need your help up here. Put my hold somehow. Stand behind Chauncey called and said, hey, can you come up to a meeting? And it was, real informal. I said, sure, No, very nice drive up this morning, no stress. And as soon as I walked in the door, it's like, where's the money? Where's the money? No, I'm going to talk a little bit about, about MoDOT, probably some stuff you may not be interested in knowing. Maybe it'll spur some discussion. I think if we take some questions afterwards, you may have some, some questions that you may want to ask. Transportation and the economy. I've had a little cough, so we're going to have to work through that. How's transportation and the economy connected? We we talk a lot about it, we hear a lot about it. We spend a lot of time looking at some economic analysis, trying to analyze how the two are connected. Right now, we find for every dollar spent, can you hear me without this thing? Can you hear me, Art? No? No, I need it. All right. For every dollar that we spend in transportation, we're getting about $4 of economic return, which is a big deal. I mean, that is a large number, and that's something that we all need to remember. We talk about some money and some great things that have happened. If you look back to 2004, that's when Amendment 3 was passed. Amendment 3 was passed, and all of a sudden our budgets basically doubled. We went from about $500 to $600 million a year to $1.2 billion. So we were able to do a lot of work on the interstates, just lots of things going on. And then we had, the ERA funding was added in there. We got about $65 million of ERA money to put on the interstate. So we've done a lot in the last 4 years, but where are we at today? Our past director talked a lot about a funding cliff. Amendment 3 funds are now, that's all behind us. ERA money has already been spent, so we're down into the $500 to $600 million a year range for the state as a whole. And that equates to basically a maintenance-only program for MoDOT. We're not looking at a lot of new things, a lot of new, four-laning and all these big things. We're just trying to manage what we've got. We need to smile a little bit. There is some things happening. I know it's, the economy and everything else going on. We're in this maintenance-only mode, but there's some things to look at, some things to consider. A couple of those things that I think is important. Our Highway Commission recently passed. We're shrinking as everybody else is shrinking with our employees and everything else happening. But our commission did increase the cost share. We had $30 million of cost share set up. That $30 million now has gone to $35 million. So we are increasing, that cost share pot of money, which is something to be, something to look at, something to consider. Some things that have happened, I heard a little bit of talk about Route 67. What's happened over there? If you look at what's happened in the Farmington area, it's dramatic. It really is. 27% reduction in the accident rates on Route 67 through Farmington. Getting rid of the signals and the stoplights on Route 67 is a big deal. That community is growing. You look at our two highest traveled areas in our 14-county district. Farmington area, is running right in there, 30,000 a day. Around Cape, around the airport, is also about that, about 30 to 32,000 a day. So those are what we call our hot spots. And that's important to know. That's important to know and important to keep those highways moving efficiently. You look south, you look from Fredericktown to Poplar Bluff, and what they've done with, pulling together, similar to this. There's no money. They asked. I was in a meeting, in several meetings. How can we get that done? If you're depending on MoDOT to do 67, it's not going to happen. And that was the message. We would end up looking at the key areas along 67, and it would be built over years and years and years and years. The community pulled together in that instance, looked at a half-cent sales tax, taxed themselves. Not an ounce of concrete is being laid in Poplar Bluff. just an amazing story. Their half-cent tax raised $60 million. That $60 million went in with MoDOT's $90 million and the Corps of Engineers $28 million to 4-lane 67 between Poplar Bluff and Fredericktown. Has that had an impact? You know, that's the transportation aspect of it. Has that had an impact on the economy? Been in meetings this week. You know, the hospital is expanding, $170 million expansion of the hospital. It has. I mean, it really, the importance of transportation to the economy is there. Is it the only thing? No. I mean, it's not. You know, having a good road is not going to guarantee economic development, but it's a key component. You know, I've said in the past I view this 3 things are really important. Geography, where you're at and what's going on around you is important. Transportation is important. And then just good vision, good community leadership, and being able to see and pull together and say, how big a deal is this to our community? And, you know, if everybody can kind of see a vision of where this, you know, where this thing could go, then it's exciting. I mean, you know, I've seen it in that instance, and that's not the only instance in the state. The city of Washington's done the same thing. Counties up north on Route 36 all pulled together. Several examples in the state of Missouri where that has happened. But if you're depending on government at this time, I mean, it's going to be, you know, it's going to be a while. So that's kind of where that's at. The cost share program is really good. Lots of, you know, the $30 million doesn't sound like a lot, but, you know, even piecing things together, you know, we've done a lot of signals and intersections for folks that have came in and said, hey, we've got $400,000, can you match, you know, $400,000, let's improve an intersection, or let's improve, you know, that kind of stuff. We do a lot of that, and, you know, it's really helping not only MoDOT and the safety of the highway, but the, you know, the economics of those businesses in the area. So that's kind of just some highlights. I won't bore you with a lot of other details, but there's been, you know, been some things. I think there's still some hope out there. So let's, you know, keep that thought in mind. That transportation and the economy, to me, are linked directly, and see what we can do. Is that all right?
Bill, before you leave, could you tell us what that match ratio is? Is that dollar for dollar, or is it with the highway department, or is it from a community matching with the highway department?
Okay, the $30 million, or the cost share program in and of itself, is a 50-50, so it's a direct match. There is, you know, there's a lot of info online about this. If you look at it, it talks about economic development funds, may even push that up a little bit. If there's economic development tied to it, then it may be, maybe it could be something more than 50-50. But right now, the competition for these funds are so great, 50-50 is pretty well, you need, where I recommend folks to go to. We had the hospital that I was just referring to, we got a cost share approved for that, and it was a $10 million interchange, looking, you know, close to the location of this hospital. City's going to pay roughly $5. MoDOT's going to pay roughly $5. And it was contingent upon the development actually occurring. So, you know, in that instance, it was kind of an economic development issue. If the economic development doesn't occur, then we're not building the interchange. We're not spending our $5 million in that location. So.
Are those funds available for study or pre-engineering, or how does that work? In other words, if we were going to look at an area from Interstate 55 to C Road, or just past C Road, what Tom talked about, do we have to come up with money for feasibility or pre-engineering or studies, or how does that work?
Yeah, you know, in its infancy, you know, I'll just kind of relate this to what happened in Poplar Bluff. There was, the community group really got together and kind of began working with folks to develop that vision, that game plan. I think that really kind of helped. You know, one of the first things, a scope, you know, what scope and an estimate, you know, what's the vision for the community, and you know, is it a 3-lane, is it a alternating, you know, 4-lane, is it a 4-lane, is it, you know, what's the phases of it, and then rough costs. That I can throw, you know, that was about $3 million a mile is what that cost to, you know, provide a 4-lane facility. So, you know, we would work with the community, work with the groups on, you know, whatever we could to help that. I don't know if we want more questions now, or.
We'll wait and at the end of the.
Bill, what would the cost to scope that be typically if you were to break it down into, to little pieces? First, we need to know what it's going to cost to, to move forward, but that scoping itself will have a cost associated with it. What do you think the community would need to be looking at to come up with some seed money just to get the process going?
For scoping, I think our environmental documentation on the 4-lane, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, was about percent or so of the total project cost. That was just for the environmental work. So you're scoping preliminarily. I'm not real sure what you're looking at exactly. You're talking about a 4-lane.
I don't think we're that far.
Yeah, I don't know, you know, if we're talking 3-lane, I'm not real sure on the scope of the project, so.
I think there is one point that I would like to make everybody aware of. I'm not trying to put homemade Gary step down, but our county did pass a half-cent transportation tax last year. So going forward, there are some funds from a county level that we might be able to tap that we did not have available in the past. So just mention that to all.
I'm sure we'll have some more questions for you, Bill, later. In fact, you know, at this point, unless there's anybody else that would like to add any other comments before I open it up to the floor for questions? Because I have several questions that if somebody don't ask them, I will.
I would like to just use as an example, in Chauncey Gate, we got this lead from Chauncey's office, and the city and the IDC and the chamber work on this, but we recently had an inquiry for a manufacturing company, and it was a $67 million project with about $4.5 to $5 million payroll. Our criteria with the city matched very, very well as far as utilities, water, and all those sorts of things. They want to be close to an interstate highway, and we fit all those things, free land and all that. But to give you some idea of the competition, there were over 40 other communities in the state of Missouri submitted proposals for that same industry. And the company was out of Nebraska. The product was going from Nebraska to Birmingham, and it was a food meat related process. And the water requirements and all those sorts of things were very high. We did fit those criteria. We submitted, but again, just to give you some idea of the competition out there, there were over 40 other communities also submitted. Now, the last I heard was they came back and asked for more specific numbers on utility costs. You may or may not be aware of this, Chauncey, but they followed up with the city on utility costs, electric, gas, water, sewer, those sorts of things, which indicated to me that we probably made the first cut, but that might get it from 40 down to 15, and then we hope to get it in the community. But I just pointed out that the transportation aspect was a major issue because of the 55 corridor. And then the second aspect was just how competitive this stuff is out there. Just Missouri, because this was not going to be just Missouri. There were other states along the route that I'm sure were also competing for this project. But the IDC and the Chamber of City did submit a very aggressive package for that company.
Okay, is there anybody else that would like to make any comments before we open up for questions? And, questions of any of the presenters here this morning. One thing that I might say before that is our vision of the initial group of IDC here in St. John is of forming a committee of people that would include, and I'll just come down the list with who we would like a representative from basically the two counties, thinking in terms of Highway 32 from Farmington to the port. We kind of looked at about 12 people that we would like to serve on the super committee, and this would be a representative from St. James County, representatives from St. Francis County, I'm talking county governments, a member of the St. Genevieve IDC, IDA, St. Francis IDC, somebody from the Port Authority, somebody from regional planning, at least 2 businesses that are located on 32, present businesses that are already there, be it trucking companies or whatever. Representative from the city of St. Genevieve, representative from the city of Farmington, our regular representative, our state representative, and our senator at large. And from that 12 people, we would go forward as far as trying to come up with, at this point, and I'm sure that was what Ron's thinking about, is where we start is with some kind of scope or some kind of a planning type thing to at least get something on paper. And in order to do that, it's going to take funds. And, I'll go on record saying that, I'm sure that the St. Genevieve IDC, we don't have a whole lot of money, but we do have some that could be used for seed money for those initial studies as far as coming up with scope and environmental and those type things. And if we can maybe find a grant somewhere from DNR or somebody, I don't know, what's out there as far as not construction, but just from the planning stage of it. I'm sure St. James County will kick in a big wad, won't they, like Gary?
Oh, yeah, I got money in my car out there.
Okay. At this point, think about that, and anybody that would fall in one of those categories that I just mentioned, if you would give your name to either Ron or myself, we'll try to put this together, and we will, try to move forward with a planning committee that would meet, I don't know if it would be monthly, maybe quarterly, but to start off with here, I would think we'd be meeting more often until we get things rolling, kind of explore what seed money is available out there, at least for the planning stage, and we'll go from there. At this point, I'll entertain any questions from the floor.
Tom, would you like to just bring the panel up to the front and have them, that way they can face the entire
Do
audience? That would be
Yeah,
better.
if the presenters, if you would come up to the front, and that way you can pretty well address your questions to any of them.
Just grab a seat.
Yeah, I would just go up there and
grab
sit
a
down.
seat.
It's fine.
Have a seat.
If I could just make a comment, and in regards to a scope of a plan, I certainly don't think that we're thinking in terms of a 4-lane highway between Farmington and St. Genevieve. But if you think in terms of maybe the level of what Highway 8 is going from Bismarck to Potosi, 2 lanes with a wide shoulder and that sort of thing, that would be a great goal for us to get to that level. I
turn lanes.
But if anybody else has any thoughts on that, now would be a good time to express them.
Question? Surely we go. Yes, sir.
I've lived out on Highway C for 30 years, and during that period of time, there have been 2 surveys made of traffic patterns that exist on Highway C, and nothing happened as a result of it. Recently, there's been 2 quarries opened up on Highway C, and that has grossly increased the truck traffic, as well as the prison in Bonne Terre. Most of the drivers have found out that there's a shortcut from Highway 55 to the prison in Bonne Terre, and they're going down Highway C at 55 miles an hour, and it's got a lot of hills on it. I'd like some confirmation, if somebody can give it to me, that the prison in Bonne Terre is the only facility manufacturing meals for all the prisons in the state of Missouri, and all the trucks are leaving there every day to go to these various prisons throughout the state of Missouri. And I see a lot of truck traffic doing that, but I can't tell whether or not they are coming from the prison. I just know that that prison has a major function in the feeding of prisoners in the state of Missouri. Do we have any information on those other surveys that were made? I mean, people sat out there for 2 weeks in chairs and counted cars. I think they were MoDOT people.
Around the prison, is that what? I mean,
No, on Highway C. They were at the junction of Highway C and 32, and they were at the junction of Lawrencetown Cutoff and C.
I've got some traffic data that I'm looking at here that's from 2009. You know, we're showing about 300, almost 400 cars a day on C, right at 32. As you get closer, as D gets closer north or C gets close to D, we're about 722 cars a day.
How about trucks?
Normally, and I don't have the truck count, I'm just gonna, for gut feeling, it's probably in the neighborhood of 10 to 20% is normal. About the highest we have would be about 40% of that number would be trucks, so it's gonna be within 20 to
I don't think Highway C is 26 feet across. 2 semis on there is a real mess.
Johnson, you don't, as far as regional planning, you don't have any data on road usage in southeast Missouri?
Well, same, we get the same data.
Same thing, DOT,
MoDOT
yeah.
has. I mean, they normally do the traffic counts on it.
Yep. Okay. Gary?
Bill said that for every dollar spent, you're getting like a $4 return on economic development. So, Chauncey, you know, this is all about jobs, basically. What kind of jobs is the port going to open up for the area? Number-wise, do you have any data on that?
Yeah, we do. We've had a number of estimates, and when you look at ports, generally, you're going to have a small number at the port itself, but the big jobs are going to be in either transport or some sort of logistics or some other businesses that are going to be utilizing and needing the port facility. So those jobs will be spread out all over the region, actually. I would say the port itself, you're probably looking at somewhere 20 to 30 people could be right there at any given time. But the transportation is going to be a lot bigger than that.
And you trickle down up there too. You'll pick up other jobs, other places.
John, did they just do a follow-up study on the port in Scott City and the impact that it's had? Did I see something on that?
They had a big article in the Southeast Missourian on that not too long ago. Sherry, you probably have a lot of those numbers, what ports are doing statewide, I would
As
think.
far as jobs?
Yeah, yeah.
There are 3 ports in southeast Missouri that have direct employment of over 100 people after work. And that's not including the indirect, the
Right.
transportation. Southeast Missouri ports are the ones that all up in Seaman, Medford, and Penobscot all have over 100 people that work on the site daily.
That's on site.
That's direct.
Right. That's great. I did not attend having a conference, I just walked out the door.
Other questions? Sir?
Yeah.
I was wondering whenever you put in a turning lane, say, for instance, with a turning lane.
You can get 2 or 3, whatever, to
Get the money.
at least 1 or 2.
Put in a turning lane, how much more ground would you have to get on an average from the people that live along the edges?
That what?
Because the way I feel with the people, it's not also, the business also considering a lot of private people that live on the road that as they get older, turning onto this road, I'm thinking the turning lane may be more sufficient. Keeping trucks rolling, because I know the truck is going to keep rolling.
As far as the amount of right-of-way needed at an intersection, it's not a big number. I mean, it's if it's an at-grade intersection, is that kind of what if you've got an intersection that's, and that gets improved and widened with wide radiuses and kind of what we, call our commercial or type 5 entrance or driveway, it's not a lot of property when you look at the acre-wise.
And, well, like just the main road, if you put another lane in there, you're going to have to get property from the people along there, is that correct?
Right. Yeah, now if you go from the intersection and you're looking at the length of there's going to be size, because what we did, and it's been a little longer than 3 years, it's like 10 years plus, maybe 12 years on 32, the work that we did. We tried to stay within our existing right-of-way as much as we could. So we're pretty well maxed out there, so any widening would require a strip.
And
That's kind of-
also, who owns the railroad out that way? The railroad? Is he here?
train tracks over the dock.
Union Pacific owns, they own that line.
That's correct.
My thing is that most of the areas are close to the railroad down through there. And I was curious if MoDOT and the railroad would work together. It may not be as big of an impact as other people. I was curious.
We've done projects together before.
That was one of the questions I had is for a long time, I've been hearing about, you go out 32 and of course, quite a ways, you can see the railroad tracks from 32 quite a ways all the way to Farmington. And the question always that people ask me when we start talking about roads or Highway 32 is, well, wouldn't it, if a lot of these big stone companies that are out in the Lead Belt region, that would be, talking, wouldn't it be much more economical and much quicker if that was hauled to the port by rail instead of by truck?
It depends on what the commodity is. Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Okay. And then it comes up as far as, is the railroad really interested in keeping that open? And I heard something here just recently that a couple years ago that they come in and replaced every 12th tie on that route out there in order to keep it where it was an active.
I've seen trains run.
And
I'm
because
sure they replaced some Mississippi line might answer
The
that.
only time we run trains on that is when
I want
we
it.
get closed. We lease the middle portion of that track from the Union Pacific. They own it. They take care of the entryways on both sides, on the Farmington side and here in St. John. And requires us to have to spend money to go in and replace ties. We replace what they tell us to replace.
Okay. I don't know who told me that, but something about that here just a couple of years ago, they replaced every 12th tie, the whole length, but it wasn't the whole
Our track
length.
inspectors go in
Yeah.
and evaluate the track, and then if it's, I can't remember how many ties we had to do, but they'll section it out and go and replace the ties in those areas to keep the track safe to travel.
And plans for the port, Ron, is eventually to run a spur.
Hopefully down the road, that's a ways out with money, a tremendous amount of money.
Yeah.
But
That's
the
the
railroad
thought.
track is not cheap.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
Kathy?
If I could just make a comment, and please correct me if Yvonne or Chauncey, if I'm not accurate on this. The New Bourbon Port will be, and we are so close to being open, it's amazing, but New Bourbon Port will be the northernmost lock-free port on the Mississippi, below St. Louis. And our competition at the Southeast Missouri ports that you mentioned, Temescott and the others, it is very likely that shipping in will come up the Mississippi as far as they can get. We're not looking to cut anybody's throat, but we are where we are. And so we may stand to do a lot more international shipping, not just shipping out grain or stone or whatever, because of the location. People wouldn't have to truck their product from Memphis, for example. If we're able to do container loading and unloading here, they can simply truck them from here north. That's the good news. The not as good news is, while the Port of New Bourbon is virtually ready to go online in the next few months, the port in Jefferson County is scrambling like crazy to get online, because they want to stand up in a meeting, their port director, and say, we're the northernmost lock-free port on the Mississippi, come here. So we here in St. John County, by virtue of how long this project has been developing, we do have the jump on that competition. We can have customers and be in operation, and they're still essentially on the drawing board. And their funding has unfortunately dried up to a great extent. They have a wonderful study, and now no money to fund it. So the quicker that we are able to get regional business, the quicker we'll be able to develop that international business.
Questions?
I got, this is more for MoDOT, but at what point, I mean, obviously the first step is to try to find some funding somehow, whether it's taxes or whatever, but at what point, as far as preliminary estimate-wise and design-wise, would you recommend obtaining, as far as, getting with the traffic engineer like CBB, saying, we want to straighten out this little section here just east of Highway C, improving the Highway C and Highway O intersections, the 55, 32 intersections. At what point would you approach an engineer and say, give us some idea of what it would take to make some improvements? I mean, and how much that would be, whether it's going to be feasible to do all of those areas or not, or if we just got to start with just the main intersections, or what it's going to take to get anything done.
We could probably sit down with some folks and I hate to say go forward now and hire, it's been quite a bit of money. I think getting a handle on, like I threw out the $3 million a mile and kind of just getting what order of magnitude are we talking about to do a 4-lane or a 3-lane or just some widening between point A and point B. I think we could help sit down with some folks and look at some of that. I don't know if that's, to me, I guess this sort of a first meeting. I think there still needs to be some development of, what are we talking about, 3-lane, 4-lane?
I guess it's going to take a while to get any kind of money or traffic signs or traffic light or flashing light, because it worries me to death, and I'll go to the winery some, that winery coming in there on Rutland Road, that's along with the problem with C there, I can just see them with tractor trailer trucks running just normal like now. That's a terrible, terrible place here. And I don't know if there's, can you all spend money for traffic signs and things, to slow signs and traffic flashing light or something more than they've got until they get this done? Because this is going to be something that really needs to be done in the next few months. Immediate, almost. And even over.
Yeah, I think there's some things like that that we can work with the folks on and, you know, try to look at that spot improvement and, you know, what's happening immediately.
I can see a tremendous amount of traffic coming out of Rutland Road in combination with C-Road. I didn't even think about the prisons, and I know a lot of it, that is a cutoff through there. I didn't even think about that aspect as being a resident and how much traffic is coming. They're turning slow. I know they've already got some maybe a light there, some things, but what we could do cheap to get something started.
Another thing you could do is, without any cost to it, for years, I drove 32 through Weingarten, 45-mile-an-hour speed limits. Now you come in and raise it to 55. We're gonna have all these trucks barreling through there at 55. I've been asking this for 5 years, why can't you slow that back down to 45 or 35? We've got a restaurant, a gas station, a church, fire department, 3 county roads, all coming in this, actually 4 county roads, if you wanna go past JCO, coming into this little strip, and traffic's barreling through there at 55, 60 miles an hour. Why can't we lower the speed limits? I know you gotta enforce it once you lower it.
Right.
So if it's 55, they're gonna drive 60.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that our traffic folks perform a traffic study, look at the volumes and the speeds that they're traveling, and they try to set that speed limit accordingly. And maybe we need to do it another.
What we hear from MoDOT constantly, our monthly meetings with you is safety's first. Safety lose, safety's number one. Well, safety's number one, lower the speed limit and start getting tickets to people going over 40 or 45 miles an hour.
You get tractor trailer trucks around in front of the Midway, they're 55, 60 mile an hour. They're right on top of Oak Road. The other junction right there, coming over a hill, kind of.
I was in the county shed this morning, I pulled up to JC Hall, and those cars are going 60 miles an hour through there. You can't see it, it's a blind hill. You probably don't know what I'm talking about. There is no reason for that speed limit to be 55 through there.
Also, at the last TAC meeting, Presiding Commissioner Geck addressed the Rutland Road issue with MoDOT, and I'm presuming that the commission has sent the letter that MoDOT requested to put in writing, that those 3 priorities, if you remember the discussion, MoDOT right now has, for their STIP, each county in each region has submitted priorities. And what Commissioner Geck had requested was, we need to add one, because some counties have 4 or 5, and we only have 3, or we need to change them because of the Rutland Road issue. If not addressing anything else, except there's going to be 700-800 cars a day extra right there if they're going to have those banquet and wedding facilities. So what happened?
I'm not aware of a letter.
Okay.
I think that, you know, I think that what we're talking about is we have 14 counties, and as we plan priorities in our district, you know, you can have, if I collected 1 need per county, that's 14 needs. That's probably more than we're going to have money to fix. There's nothing magic about 3, but that's, you know, that gives us a 42, you know, needs across the district to kind of look at, and that's what we're talking about. You know, ideally, as we look at those, kind of the way this pans out, the 3 needs that we get for each county, and we let them prioritize what's the most important for the county. You know, and it's a process. It's more than somebody saying, well, I wanted this, and this is what it needs to be a county-wide. Here's the priorities for the county. Here's our number 1 priority. Here's our number 2. Here's our number 3. And then what we do is take those 42 needs, and we'll go down and we'll meet with Chauncey and his counterparts, Steve Duke and Felicity Brady, the other regional planning directors, and we'll say, okay, here's 42 needs in our district. You know, help us sift through these things and prioritize them, high, medium, and low. And, you know, is it magic? Does that mean that the highest need is going to get funded? No, it doesn't. But that's where that list comes in, like the Route B, St. John out to the wineries. That's kind of how that thing filtered up. You know, it's like, okay, that's a priority in St. John, and things just kind of worked out, and it was a priority, and it was done. I don't know if that helps or answers any questions.
From a safety standpoint, though, like through Weingarten and then at 32, like I said, we requested a study on putting lights up there because you got the 4 ramps, 2 lettered roads, 3 businesses, and similar situation in Midway for slowing the speed down. But I was told that they studied it, when they study the speed, they don't just study the speed limit, they study the median speed,
right,
average, and then that's how they set the speed limit. So if everybody's driving 60, they're not going to set it at 45. Yeah, your average goes up, so the faster they drive, the higher the speed limit's going to be, and still the more dangerous it gets.
That's related to some accidents.
But it took us almost a year to get you to drop the speed limit of 55 and 32 down to 45. But the accident reduction out there has been tremendously lower since you dropped that speed limit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that. I can look into it.
But you mentioned you could work with the lighting and stuff, but if we have that much more truck traffic once the port goes online and the winery traffic getting off there, there's going to need to be stoplights or some additional safety features.
We got 9 different places in that little stretch where traffic comes on to 32, counting your 2 on ramps, off ramps on 55, your businesses, your lettered roads.
I guess and I agree, I think that we need to take a look at it. What I'm seeing here, you know, I said 382 cars coming out on Route C onto 32. You know, when you look at, and you can pull these traffic maps up on our website, 382 cars or trucks. When you look at our 14 counties and the highways that we're dealing with, I'll be straight up with you, that's not very significant when you look at when you look at the raw numbers.
It's not the MoDOT, because you're looking at the big picture, but it's a big thing to St. Genevieve County. We're looking at just a little bit.
I understand that. I'm here and
And you're here and we're
taking darts.
We're not even going to talk
about that at all.
And we're not even going to talk about the rest area.
Oh, let's talk about it here.
Questions? Yes, sir.
On this proposed thing on 32 between Weingarten there, on the Weingarten area, were they thinking of, or has anybody done any thoughts, would you just widen that, use the existing route, or
we're
not to that point?
not even.
Not to that point.
The purpose of this meeting was to get into the room the entities and businesses and so forth that we thought would be the players that would be interested. The next step will be form the committee that Tom's talking about here, and then start to determine that scope of plan. I don't know what we're talking about, and there may be A, B, and C depending upon cost and where can we raise our funds to get the 50% match to start doing the project. Whether that's some of the county's half-cent sales tax, whether we form a transportation district, whether there's a surcharge at the port per ton on the amount of material that gets, we don't know what the plan is. And then we have to put dollars to that, and then we have to figure out how to do it. So the purpose of this meeting was to see whether there was interest in trying to form something on our side, and then getting with St. Francis County, and like he says, with Farmington growing over there, I would think Farmington would be very interested in 32 improving, because there'd be more people who drive over there and shop in their stores as opposed to going to Festus, So, but we wanted to start it on this end, that we figure out what we want to do, because the worst of the highways, I think are over this way and pretty much in that center core that we're talking about from C to 55. And again, whether that it becomes, and I don't know what, do you have a classification of the types of highway, like the Highway 8 going to Potosi, what grade or classification of highway would that be? Or do you know?
It'll be a major collector. But, yeah, we do have a system, and 32 is, you know, when we look at our roads in our district, there is a kind of a classification system. We have our major highway system and our minor roads, and 32 is on our major system. So it's in there. Of course, your interstates are in there, but it's in there with the Route 72 between Fredericktown and Jackson, Route 60, Route 412, Route 67. So there's.
Sir?
Again, I got to go back to ancient history, but I recall maybe 20 years ago, there was a rumor that there was going to be a road made between 67 and 55 about where OOD is, and they had already made all the plans for it, and something happened. I don't know if that would have all the truck traffic on it and eliminate disrupting C. But I don't know if it's still around over there. Somebody's got to go look at the records and see if they still have it.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any kind of a plan.
That's before he was born.
So Bill was still what this pass.
But it was, and Fred Weber bought a quarry to do it.
Well, what you have to look at too, what growth and development has occurred since that 20 years, and don't need to be.
I know.
I can't even fathom anything being built across that area, given what's developed along Highway 32, and trying to address those needs. So that would just be my personal opinion. But
I think he's right, though. There was a 20-year plan back in the late 80s, early 90s, when Senator Staples was still in transportation. He was going to tie every community with 5,000 people or more together with 4-lane roads and the whole thing. That was one of the reasons they passed that proposition he was talking about earlier. But just to, on MoDOT's behalf, a little bit on the Transportation Committee, to put things in perspective, when he says he looks at the big picture, not just here, but statewide. Missouri has almost double the roads, state roads, any state surrounding, the 7 states surrounding us. We're up over 34,000 miles of state roads versus like Kansas with maybe 16,000 and Iowa with 18 or 20,000. And out of those surrounding states, we have the most roads and the lowest road tax in the entire region. So whenever you're talking about how we spend our money and how we got to put it under the road system, that just a little plug for MoDOT. They're doing with less money and double the roads what the surrounding states are. And currently, our major roadways have went from about 40% good roads to about 80-something% just in the last few years with the money from that proposition or amendment.
Are you saying that if you had the gas tax in Illinois, you think
it would help, but that's also a whole other system because the push is for greener and less gas being burned. And so all the funding for the roads comes from gas. So every time we buy a new vehicle that saves gas, we take more money away from the roads that we want to drive the new car on. So it's kind of don't know which one comes first, the chicken or the egg. But that's just a challenge they face. I thought maybe that was something that maybe people weren't aware of.
If you friend us on Facebook, in the last few days, there's been a graphic put up on our Facebook page that shows the roads that we maintain in the state of Missouri, and it shows Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa, the number of roads, the miles that they maintain, and we maintain as much as those 3 states put together. The graphic says it all.
I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, but Brad, you and the doctor both here with the school bus. And of course, both counties, but you see that is going to be more of a problem when this truck traffic starts. Plus, the winery is going to start much sooner than that. And anticipated truck traffic this winter. What's that do to you out there with that kind of speed limit 'Cause you've got buses stopping in that same area through the, or you have any close calls?
45 miles an hour all the way.
No hills and no curves.
There you go.
No,
Yeah, more traffic, I mean, you got a bus stop, we've got restrictions, but like 300 feet visibility, you got 8,000 pounds running 60 mile an hour, it's gonna take them more than 300 feet if they come.
And
There's a lot of
you enter and
dangerous
exit
spots.
that road at Rutland Road, don't you, as well as the old road and the other road.
Yeah, we were real happy when they put that light up there for,
That's
get
helps
down on
some.
there.
Scott, do you have a question?
Well, the price of fuel keeps going where it's at, you won't have to worry about roads, we won't be driving.
Yeah, that's right.
This is less fuel tax to get to. I guess I'm seeing this Port Authority up here, and when that happens, it sounds like, this is gonna happen. And the only way that facility, the traffic, is if you can access it. So, it's a big deal, obviously, that's why we're here. When I hear MoDOT say that we're in maintenance-only mode, to me, that's Band-Aid mode. You're just patching potholes. If the traffic gets up to where they're saying that it's going to be, these local highways are gonna see stress like they have never seen. At what point does MoDOT recognize that we're just Band-Aiding this thing, spending dollars with no improvement whatsoever, and saying, let's start investing in a new system around here instead of Band-Aiding what we currently have? Where's the threshold? How do we get to that point?
What I would like to say, Scott, before you take over, that was exactly the reason that I wanted to start this process now. The last thing I wanted to be doing was reactionary, where we have one of these trucks plow into a school bus out there, we lose 20 students, Now, go ahead and ask. I'll give you a little breathing room there.
And it's getting closer to 12 o'clock. No, I mean, that's an excellent question, and, I think it comes down to, and I'll get this story in about my 7-year-old. He talked, and it's gonna be big picture, so bear with me, but I'll get back to it. But his teacher asked him what to define freedom, and he said, well, it's being able to do what you want to do and go where you want to go, and he got a little gold star for that, and I thought that's pretty cool. And I've tried to use that at different times, because I think, we've got to decide, you've asked, when is MoDOT going to decide to do something? We as a nation are going to have to decide, when are we going to, is transportation important, and is it important to us in Missouri? And when are we going to make that decision that, okay, this level of investment that we're putting into the system is just not there? And I think that there's some rumblings of some groups that are getting together across the state and trying to begin to look at some of that stuff and kind of flesh some of that out. But, I see that as a few years down the road. I mean, we're, as a DOT, we're just, okay, we know we get 600 million, and that's what we're gonna, that's what we're gonna do with it. But I think that the questions you're asking is right on, because I think there's gonna be a time when we're gonna have to say, okay, how much is transportation to me? And we're gonna have to make that decision, and I don't know.
And where I want to see us is if and when it gets to that point, and there is some other source of funds, that we're ready to go. And that was all going. I'll throw one more thing out. I subscribed for years to a magazine, Area Development, which is used for industrial development, advertising, so forth, and they do an annual selection or do an annual survey of companies that select sites, what are the priorities. And this year, for the first time, the number one selection factor that consultants and companies looked at was highway accessibility. You went ahead of labor, and historically labor has always been the number one, but obviously with the large labor pool, labor fell down to number two. This year, highway accessibility was the number one factor in site selection. So that goes back to what you're talking about with developing the board and this sort of thing. We would hate to get to a point where we had a company wanted to come in here and we couldn't get the access that they needed, we didn't have the funds to do it. So it gets their early plan.
Well, I know this don't happen on the local level, and site plan takes place in Jefferson City, but you keep talking about your funding going down. What are the bosses in Jefferson City doing to get it built back up and to alternative to the program you've lost the last couple of years? Because as Scott said, you can't go through the Band-Aid mode forever. You have to increase your revenues. I mean, is there any plans in Jeff City or Joe?
Joe may have more info. I mean, I see it as being a couple years off as far as any kind of petition initiative being kicked around, that may come around to kind of put something on the ballot through a petition. That I see that as a few years, 2 or 3 years down the road.
I don't see anything right now. There's been talk, there's some, has been for several years on some of the other big projects, but the public-private partnerships and doing some things like that have become more popular, not just with transportation, but other infrastructure. And they're also, MoDOT has done some things where they do their cost savings, or I forget the terminology the engineers use.
Practical design.
Practical design stuff where they go out and look at it, and if they say it's going to cost $30 million to do these 2 intersections, they look at the practical design. If they say $5 million, they put that $5 million toward projects like, that's available if it's in your district for the scoping or whatever you need, a smaller amount for. So that's something that they've started doing as one way of utilizing their money better. But as part of new money, that still goes back that they're funded out of the road tax. And
it's going to drop this year with gas prices going up. People
are going to drive less and more efficient vehicles.
We don't have much control on that other than, as Representative Fowler said, to cut our expenses. And that's what we're trying to do, is cut expenses.
At some point, you got to start raising revenue somehow.
There's a group looking at that. There's a number of different proposals out there, and that's where they keep coming up with how do you do it? Do you do it with the general sales tax? And that always meets a lot of opposition. People don't want to see, the grocery store paying for roads, and for some reason there's not a road connection there in a lot of people's minds. And so those discussions have begun. There's been a statewide group looking at that, is it a wheel tax, is it a toll roads, what's the mix, and how do you go about doing that? So I guess that will eventually come to a vote. But it's not going to be, I don't guess it's going to be this term, is it, Bill? I don't see it.
Yes, sir.
How much fuel does Missouri use in a year, and if you raise it a cent, I mean, after $4, what's one more penny the way I look at it?
That's one of the...
What's about 30 million? Somebody that...
What's a penny bring?
Brings about 30 million, I think. 30 million, I think, is that right? 2 cents. 2 cents, which is kind of what we had back in the 90s, was a 2-cent increment. And I think it was about, the 2 cents was maybe $60 million.
But that is one of the other ideas that Chauncey, when he went through the different options like toll roads or whatever, that's another one of the things they're looking at out there. Can we convince people that with $4 a gallon gas, another penny or two for roads isn't going to, set you back like it would have when it was 89 cents a gallon or $1.10, which I guess we'll see now.
But 3 cents gas tax hike, people see it's going to the road, when they see the 50 cents tax we got the last 3 weeks, they know it's going in the oil company pockets. It does make a difference in their thinking.
Just, it looks like it's kind of beating a dead horse here. Let me read the list again of who we feel would be good representatives on a committee to take this to the next step, to get it rolling. St. Genevieve County, St. Francis County, St. John IDC, St. Francis IDC, the Port Authority, regional planning, business, at least 2 business places on 32, City of St. John, City of Farmington, representatives from the state, Joe, somebody from his office, somebody from Catherine's office, those 12 people. If we don't get some people that come forward, then what my aim would be to seek some people out to fill these positions, to see if they're interested. It doesn't have to be people that's here today. And as I said, we'll break up here. If I'm sure most of us will stay around. If you have some questions that you want to bring up, we'll be around for a while. But if you are interested, see either Ron or myself. If you fall into one of these things and are interested and could be some time that you'd want, that you'd be willing to put into this. So we'll take your name. As this proceeds, as this committee would farm some things, we would probably have more public meetings down the road, keep people informed as far as, the direction that committee's taking and the progress that maybe they're making, maybe some funds that they're shaking loose from some unknown grants that may surface that would be some seed money for the planning end of this. Not even thinking at this point about engineering or construction, but just the scope and planning stage. If there's no other questions, I'll get you out of here by 12, like we said.